The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Forward Operating Base Reaper, Afghanistan, as Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her rifle scope for what felt like the thousandth time that morning. The heat waves rising from the sand created a shimmering mirage that made distant objects dance like ghosts in her crosshairs. She had been stationed at this remote outpost for 6 months now, and every day brought new challenges that tested not just her marksmanship skills, but her resolve to prove herself in a world dominated by men who questioned whether a woman belonged on the front lines. Maria had grown up in a small town in Texas where hunting was a way of life. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her to shoot when she was barely tall enough to hold a rifle properly. What started as weekend trips to the deer lease had evolved into a passion for precision shooting that eventually led her to the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School. She was one of only 3 women to ever complete the grueling program, and the only one currently deployed in an active combat zone. The other Marines at FOB Reaper had initially treated her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some were openly hostile, questioning whether the Corps had lowered its standards to accommodate women. Others were simply unsure how to interact with a female sniper in their midst. But Maria had learned early in her military career that actions spoke louder than words, and she was determined to let her rifle do the talking. Her first confirmed kill had come 3 weeks into her deployment. A Taliban fighter had been moving through a compound roughly 800 meters from her position, believing he was safely concealed behind a low wall. Maria had been tracking insurgent movement in the area for 2 days, noting patterns and establishing fields of fire. When the opportunity presented itself, she took the shot without hesitation. The sound of her M40A5 sniper rifle echoed across the valley, and the threat was eliminated with surgical precision. Word of the kill spread quickly through the small base, but instead of earning respect, it seemed to fuel more doubt among some of the senior enlisted men. They whispered among themselves that maybe someone else had taken the shot, or that it had been a lucky accident. Maria heard the rumors, but chose to focus on her mission rather than waste energy defending herself against gossip and speculation. The second kill came a week later during a complex ambush situation. Enemy fighters had surrounded a convoy of supply vehicles on the main road leading to the base. Maria and her spotter, Corporal Jake Thompson, had been positioned on an overwatch mission when the attack began. From their elevated position nearly a kilometer away, Maria could see muzzle flashes coming from multiple positions as the Taliban fighters coordinated their assault. The convoy was pinned down with nowhere to go, and radio chatter indicated that casualties were mounting. Maria quickly identified the enemy fighters who appeared to be directing the attack, distinguishing them by their movements and positioning. These were likely experienced commanders who needed to be eliminated to disrupt the ambush. Her first shot took out a fighter who was clearly giving hand signals to coordinate the attack. The second shot, fired less than 30 seconds later, eliminated another insurgent who was attempting to move a heavy machine gun into a more advantageous position. The precision of her shots from such an extreme distance broke the back of the ambush. The remaining Taliban fighters, suddenly leaderless and confused, began to retreat. The convoy was able to move to safety, and several American lives were saved. When the after-action reports were filed, Maria's contribution was documented and praised by the company commander. Yet somehow, the whispers and doubts persisted among certain members of the unit. It was during these early weeks that Maria first encountered Gunnery Sergeant Rick Morrison, a career Marine with 22 years of service and multiple combat deployments. Morrison was old-school military, the kind of man who believed that certain jobs were meant for men only. He had made his feelings about women in combat roles clear on several occasions, though he was careful to keep his comments just within the bounds of military regulation. Morrison commanded respect throughout the base due to his experience and his reputation as a formidable warrior. He had served in Iraq during some of the heaviest fighting and had earned a Bronze Star for his actions during the Second Battle of Fallujah. His word carried weight with both enlisted men and officers, which made his skepticism about Maria particularly damaging to her reputation within the unit. The turning point began during a routine briefing in the command center. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity in a valley system approximately 15 kilometers from base. Several IED attacks on coalition forces in recent weeks suggested that a significant Taliban cell was operating from the area, using the rugged terrain to their advantage. The mission was straightforward but dangerous. A small reconnaissance team would be inserted into the valley to gather intelligence on enemy movements and positions. Maria and Corporal Thompson would provide overwatch from a ridgeline that offered commanding views of the suspected enemy positions. Their job would be to eliminate high-value targets and provide security for the recon team if they were discovered and needed to extract under fire. As the briefing concluded and Marines began filing out to prepare their equipment, Gunnery Sergeant Morrison approached the intelligence officer with what appeared to be a casual question. However, his voice carried clearly across the now-quiet command center, and Maria realized that his comment was intended for her ears as much as anyone else's. Morrison expressed doubt about relying on unproven snipers for such a critical mission. He suggested that perhaps someone with more experience should take the overwatch position, someone whose kill count was verified and whose abilities under pressure were known quantities. The implication was clear, even though he never mentioned Maria by name. Maria felt her face flush with anger, but she maintained her composure. She had learned early in her Marine Corps career that emotional responses only reinforced negative stereotypes about women in combat. Instead, she focused on her equipment checks and mission preparation, channeling her frustration into determination to prove her capabilities once and for all. The next morning, as the sun began to rise over the Afghan mountains, Maria and Thompson made their way to the designated overwatch position. The climb was steep and treacherous, requiring them to carry their equipment and supplies for what could be a multi-day mission. Maria's pack weighed nearly 80 pounds, including her rifle, ammunition, water, food, and communications equipment. The overwatch position was a natural rock formation that provided excellent concealment and fields of fire across the valley below. Maria spent several hours setting up her position, carefully arranging camouflage and establishing range cards for various potential target areas. Thompson set up his spotting scope and began the methodical process of identifying and cataloging potential threat positions throughout the valley. For the first day and a half, the valley appeared quiet. The recon team moved carefully through their assigned areas, gathering intelligence and photographing suspected enemy positions. Radio communications were kept to a minimum to avoid detection, with check-ins scheduled at predetermined intervals. It was during the afternoon of the second day that Thompson spotted movement in a compound roughly 1,200 meters away. Through his spotting scope, he could see several figures moving between buildings in what appeared to be a coordinated pattern. The compound had been identified in intelligence briefings as a suspected Taliban stronghold, but this was the first time actual enemy presence had been confirmed. Maria adjusted her rifle and peered through her scope at the distant compound. The range was at the extreme end of her weapon system's effective capabilities, but she had made successful shots at similar distances during training. More importantly, the wind conditions were favorable, with minimal crosswind that could affect bullet trajectory. As she observed the compound, Maria began to identify what appeared to be a planning session taking place in a courtyard area. Several men were gathered around what looked like a map or document, pointing at various locations and engaged in animated discussion. Based on their positioning and behavior, these appear to be senior Taliban commanders planning future operations. Thompson confirmed her assessment through his spotting scope and began calculating range, wind speed, and other factors that would affect shot placement. The decision of whether to engage was ultimately Maria's, but she knew that eliminating these high-value targets could significantly disrupt enemy operations in the region. The first shot was the most critical. At this extreme range, the sound of the rifle would travel more slowly than the bullet itself, but the muzzle flash and impact would immediately alert the remaining targets that they were under attack. Maria would have perhaps 10 to 15 seconds to engage additional targets before they scattered to cover. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the focus state that all snipers must achieve for precision shooting. The crosshairs settled on the center mass of what appeared to be the senior commander, a tall man who seemed to be directing the discussion while pointing at various locations on their planning materials. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as the shot broke cleanly. Through her scope, Maria watched as the target dropped immediately, confirming a hit. The other men in the courtyard froze for a split second in confusion before beginning to scatter toward the buildings for cover. Maria's second shot caught another figure who was running toward a doorway. The man stumbled and fell, clearly hit but still moving. Her third shot ensured that he would not be getting back up. By now, the remaining Taliban fighters had reached cover, and the courtyard was empty except for the 2 confirmed kills. Thompson was already on the radio, reporting the engagement to the command center and providing battle damage assessment. The successful elimination of what appeared to be senior Taliban leadership would be significant intelligence for future operations in the region. What Maria and Thompson didn't know was that their radio communications were being monitored not just by their own command center, but by a larger operations center where senior officers from multiple units were coordinating regional counterinsurgency efforts. Among those listening to the real-time reports of Maria's successful engagement was a Marine general who had been following her career with interest. Brigadier General Patricia Hayes was one of the highest-ranking women in the Marine Corps and a strong advocate for expanding combat roles for female Marines. She had been watching Maria's deployment carefully, knowing that the success or failure of women in these pioneer roles would influence military policy for years to come. General Hayes had been in meetings at the regional headquarters when reports of the successful sniper engagement began coming in over the communications net. The precision of the shots at extreme range, combined with the apparent elimination of high-value targets, represented exactly the kind of performance that validated her belief in the capabilities of properly trained female Marines. However, General Hayes was also aware of the ongoing skepticism about Maria's reported kill count among some members of her unit. Reports had reached her through informal channels about doubts being expressed by senior enlisted personnel, particularly Gunnery Sergeant Morrison. She knew that these doubts, if left unchallenged, could undermine not just Maria's effectiveness, but the broader integration of women into combat roles. The general made a decision that would have far-reaching implications. She would make an unannounced visit to Forward Operating Base Reaper to personally assess the situation and, if necessary, address any issues that were affecting unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. Meanwhile, back at FOB Reaper, news of Maria's successful long-range engagement had spread throughout the base. The elimination of what intelligence officers confirmed were high-value Taliban targets had disrupted enemy operations in the region and likely saved American lives. However, instead of universal praise, the reaction among some Marines was mixed. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. On one hand, he could not argue with the documented results of Maria's mission. The kills were confirmed, the targets were verified as enemy combatants, and the tactical impact was undeniable. On the other hand, his personal beliefs about women in combat roles made it difficult for him to acknowledge her success. Morrison began to privately express doubts about the reported details of the engagement. He suggested that perhaps the range had been exaggerated or that favorable conditions had made the shots easier than they appeared. Some younger Marines who respected Morrison's experience began to echo these doubts, creating a divide within the unit between those who supported Maria and those who remained skeptical. The situation was further complicated by the fact that Maria continued to perform at an exceptional level. Her fourth confirmed kill came during a night operation when she eliminated a Taliban fighter who was attempting to place an IED along a route frequently used by coalition convoys. The shot was made using night vision equipment at a range of nearly 600 meters, demonstrating not just marksmanship skill, but tactical awareness and patience. Her fifth kill occurred during a complex operation involving multiple units. Enemy fighters had established a blocking position that was preventing the movement of a supply convoy carrying critical medical supplies to a remote outpost. Maria's position allowed her to observe the enemy fighters without being detected. When the opportunity presented itself, she eliminated the machine gunner who was the key threat to the convoy's movement. Each successful engagement was properly documented and verified through multiple sources, including after-action reports, photographic evidence, and witness statements. However, the whispers and doubts continued to persist among certain members of the unit. The tension reached a breaking point during a routine morning briefing when Morrison made a comment that crossed the line from professional skepticism to personal attack. During a discussion of recent enemy activity in the region, he questioned whether reported sniper kills were being properly verified, suggesting that inflated kill counts were becoming a problem that affected tactical decision-making. Maria realized that Morrison's comments were directed at her, even though he didn't mention her name specifically. She also realized that his doubts were beginning to affect the confidence that other Marines had in her abilities. If this continued, it could compromise her effectiveness and potentially put lives at risk during future operations. The situation was about to change dramatically, though neither Maria nor Morrison was aware that Brigadier General Hayes was already en route to their base. The general's visit would force a confrontation that would settle the questions about Maria's capabilities once and for all, but it would also reveal the broader challenges facing the military as it worked to integrate women into previously male-only combat roles. As Maria prepared for what she thought would be another routine day of training and equipment maintenance, she had no idea that her career was about to be defined by a single moment of truth that would either validate her sacrifices and prove her worth, or potentially end her dreams of serving as a combat sniper. The morning of March 15th started like any other at Forward Operating Base Reaper, with the pre-dawn call to prayer echoing from nearby villages mixing with the mechanical sounds of Marines beginning their daily routines. Maria Rodriguez was already awake, having spent the night reviewing intelligence reports and updating her range cards based on recent enemy activity patterns. Sleep had become increasingly difficult as the tension within her unit continued to escalate. The mess hall conversations had become more pointed in recent days, with clear divisions forming between those who supported Maria and those who questioned her reported achievements. Corporal Thompson remained firmly in her corner, having witnessed her skills firsthand during multiple operations. Several other Marines had also begun to speak up in her defense, particularly after her recent night engagement had been independently verified by multiple sources. However, Gunnery Sergeant Morrison's influence continued to spread doubt among a significant portion of the unit. His 22 years of experience and multiple combat decorations gave weight to his opinions, even when they were based more on personal bias than objective assessment. Morrison had become increasingly vocal about his concerns regarding what he termed unverified claims and inflated statistics. The situation had reached the point where Maria's squad leader, Staff Sergeant Kevin Martinez, felt compelled to address the issue during a private counseling session. Martinez was a fair-minded leader who evaluated Marines based on performance rather than gender, but he was concerned about the impact that unit discord might have on operational effectiveness. During their meeting, Martinez assured Maria that her performance records spoke for themselves and that official documentation supported every aspect of her reported combat activities. However, he also warned her that the ongoing controversy was beginning to affect unit morale and could potentially impact future mission assignments. He suggested that she continue to focus on her duties and let her actions speak louder than any rumors or speculation. What neither Martinez nor Maria knew was that Brigadier General Patricia Hayes had been monitoring the situation through a network of contacts and informal intelligence gathering. The general had served in the Marines for over 25 years and had broken through numerous barriers during her own career, She understood the challenges that pioneering women faced in combat roles and was determined to ensure that qualified female Marines received the support they deserved. General Hayes had also heard troubling reports about the attitude of certain senior enlisted personnel at FOB Reaper. While she respected the traditions and culture of the Marine Corps, she was equally committed to ensuring that personal prejudices did not undermine military effectiveness or prevent qualified Marines from serving in their assigned roles. The general's decision to make an unannounced inspection visit was motivated by several factors. First, she wanted to personally assess the operational effectiveness of integrated units in combat environments. Second, she was concerned about reports of unit cohesion problems that could affect mission success. Most importantly, she was determined to address any issues that might prevent the military from fully utilizing its human resources. General Hayes departed from Regional Command Headquarters early on the morning of March 15th, accompanied by a small staff and traveling in an unmarked convoy. Her visit was classified as a routine inspection, though she had specific objectives that went beyond normal administrative reviews. She planned to observe training activities, review operational records, and conduct interviews with key personnel. Meanwhile, at FOB Reaper, the daily briefing was proceeding normally until the discussion turned to recent sniper activities in the region. The intelligence officer was reviewing successful engagements from the past 2 weeks, including detailed analysis of enemy behavior changes that suggested significant disruption of Taliban command structures. Maria's recent kills were specifically mentioned as examples of precision targeting that had achieved strategic objectives beyond simple enemy elimination. The removal of senior Taliban commanders had created confusion within enemy ranks and had led to intelligence opportunities as lower-level fighters struggled to maintain operational security without experienced leadership. However, when the briefing officer finished his presentation and asked for questions or comments, Gunnery Sergeant Morrison raised his hand. His question was phrased professionally, but his tone and implications were clear to everyone in the room. He asked whether the command was confident in the verification procedures for reported sniper kills, particularly given the importance of accurate statistics for strategic planning purposes. The briefing officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Parker, was momentarily taken aback by the question. All sniper engagements were subject to rigorous documentation requirements, including after-action reports, witness statements, photographic evidence where possible, and independent verification through multiple sources. Morrison's question seemed to imply that these standard procedures were somehow inadequate. Lieutenant Colonel Parker responded by outlining the verification procedures in detail, emphasizing that every reported kill was thoroughly investigated and documented before being included in official records. He also noted that the sniper in question had consistently exceeded performance standards and had received commendations from multiple superior officers. Morrison's follow-up question was more direct and more problematic. He suggested that combat stress and the desire for recognition might lead some Marines to exaggerate their achievements, and he wondered whether additional verification measures might be appropriate for certain individuals. The implication was clear to everyone in the room, even though he didn't mention Maria by name. The tension in the briefing room was palpable as Marines shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked toward Maria to gauge her reaction, while others stared straight ahead to avoid being drawn into the confrontation. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's face showed clear displeasure at the direction the discussion was taking. Before the colonel could respond, Maria stood up and requested permission to address Morrison's concerns directly. Her voice was steady and professional, but those who knew her could detect the controlled anger beneath her calm exterior. She had reached the point where remaining silent was no longer an option. Maria began by acknowledging that verification of combat activities was indeed important for maintaining accurate records and ensuring proper recognition for all Marines. She then proceeded to outline the documentation that existed for each of her confirmed kills, including specific details about range, weather conditions, target identification, and verification sources. Her presentation was methodical and thorough, demonstrating not only her technical knowledge, but also her understanding of the broader tactical implications of her actions. She described how each engagement had contributed to mission objectives and had been coordinated with other elements to maximize strategic impact. As Maria spoke, it became clear that her knowledge and experience went far beyond simple marksmanship. She understood the complex factors that affected sniper operations, from ballistics and weather to intelligence gathering and tactical coordination. Her responses to technical questions demonstrated a level of expertise that was difficult to dismiss or discredit. However, Morrison was not easily deterred. He continued to press his concerns, suggesting that combat conditions might have made accurate assessment difficult, and that favorable circumstances might have contributed more to success than individual skill. His questions became increasingly pointed and personal, crossing the line from professional inquiry to personal attack. The confrontation was reaching a critical point when the sound of helicopter rotors could be heard approaching the base. The distinctive sound of military aircraft was common at FOB Reaper, but something about the timing and coordination suggested that this was not a routine supply or patrol mission. Lieutenant Colonel Parker received a radio message indicating that a senior officer inspection team was inbound and requesting immediate preparation for their arrival. The identity of the visiting officials was not specified, but the priority level suggested that this was a significant development that would require the full attention of base leadership. The briefing was immediately suspended as Marines began preparing for the unannounced inspection. Equipment was checked, uniforms were adjusted, and work areas were quickly organized to meet military standards. However, the tension from the confrontation between Maria and Morrison remained unresolved, hanging over the base like a storm cloud waiting to break. General Hayes's helicopter touched down at FOB Reaper exactly 30 minutes after the first radio notification. Her arrival was conducted with typical military precision, but the unannounced nature of the visit created an atmosphere of uncertainty and nervous anticipation among base personnel. The general was accompanied by her aide-de-camp, a staff intelligence officer, and a senior enlisted advisor. Her inspection team was small, but represented the kind of high-level attention that could significantly impact the careers and futures of everyone at the base. Lieutenant Colonel Parker met the general at the landing zone and provided a brief overview of current operations and unit status. General Hayes listened attentively, but indicated that she was particularly interested in reviewing recent combat activities and assessing unit readiness and morale. As the inspection party made their way through the base, General Hayes observed the interactions between Marines and noted the general atmosphere and level of military bearing. Her experience, I could detect subtle signs of tension or discord that might not be apparent to casual observers. The inspection included stops at key operational areas, including the Armory, Communications Center, and medical facilities. General Hayes asked detailed questions about procedures, training, and operational effectiveness. Her questions were probing but fair, designed to assess capabilities rather than find fault. However, the general's real interest became apparent when she requested a detailed briefing on recent sniper operations. Lieutenant Colonel Parker arranged for the briefing to take place in the main conference room, with all relevant personnel in attendance. This would include Maria, Morrison, and the other key figures in the ongoing controversy. As the briefing was being organized, word spread quickly throughout the base that the visiting general was specifically interested in sniper activities. Marines began to speculate about the purpose of the visit and whether it was related to the recent tensions within the unit. Maria found herself feeling both nervous and hopeful about the opportunity to present her case to a senior officer who might be able to provide an objective assessment of her performance. She had confidence in her abilities and her record, but she also understood that military careers could be significantly affected by the opinions and recommendations of general officers. Morrison meanwhile, was beginning to realize that his public questioning of Maria's capabilities might have attracted unwanted attention from higher headquarters. While he remained convinced that his concerns were legitimate, he was also aware that challenging the competence of Marines without solid evidence could reflect poorly on his own judgment and leadership. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would go far beyond the personal dispute between Maria and Morrison. General Hayes's presence meant that the resolution of this conflict would have implications for military policy and the future of women in combat roles. The briefing room was arranged with typical military precision, with chairs positioned to ensure clear sight lines and proper protocol relationships. A large map of the operational area was displayed on one wall, with various tactical symbols indicating recent enemy activity and friendly force positions. As personnel began filing into the briefing room, the tension was evident in their faces and body language. This was not going to be a routine administrative review, but rather a moment of truth that would determine careers and potentially influence military policy for years to come. General Hayes entered the room with quiet authority, and all personnel immediately came to attention. Her presence filled the space with the kind of command presence that only comes with decades of military experience and numerous leadership challenges successfully overcome. The general's opening remarks were brief and direct. She indicated that she was conducting a comprehensive assessment of unit effectiveness and was particularly interested in understanding how recent operational successes had been achieved. She emphasized that she was looking for honest, accurate information that would help her make informed recommendations about unit capabilities and future assignments. Lieutenant Colonel Parker began the briefing with an overview of recent operations, including statistical summaries of enemy engagements and tactical outcomes. The numbers clearly showed that FOB Reaper had been highly effective in disrupting enemy activities and achieving mission objectives. When the discussion turned to specific sniper operations, Maria was called upon to provide detailed information about her recent engagements. She stood and began presenting the same information she had shared during the morning briefing, but this time her audience included a general officer who had the authority to make definitive judgments about her capabilities and career. As Maria spoke, General Hayes listened intently, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated her own understanding of sniper operations and tactical procedures. The general's questions were challenging but fair, designed to assess competence rather than create confrontation. However, when Maria finished her presentation and the general asked if there were any questions or additional comments, Gunnery Sergeant Morrison once again raised his hand. The moment that would define careers and change lives was about to unfold in that briefing room at Forward Operating Base Reaper. The silence in the briefing room was thick with tension as Gunnery Sergeant Morrison slowly rose from his chair. Every Marine present understood that they were witnessing a pivotal moment, though none could have predicted how dramatically the next few minutes would unfold. General Hayes maintained her composed expression, but her sharp eyes revealed an intense focus as she prepared to hear what Morrison had to say. Morrison's military bearing was impeccable as he stood at attention, but those who knew him well could detect the slight tension in his shoulders that suggested he was about to make a statement that could have significant consequences. His 22 years of military service had taught him to choose his words carefully when addressing senior officers, but his personal convictions about women in combat roles have been building pressure that demanded release. The gunnery sergeant began by expressing his respect for General Hayes and acknowledging the importance of accurate reporting in military operations. His tone was professional and measured, designed to establish credibility before delivering what would essentially be an accusation against a fellow Marine. Morrison stated that while he had no doubt about Sergeant Rodriguez's dedication and training, he had serious concerns about the verification of her reported combat activities. He suggested that the extreme ranges and challenging conditions described in her after-action reports seemed inconsistent with realistic expectations for combat effectiveness. His words were carefully chosen to avoid direct accusations of dishonesty, instead focusing on questions about verification procedures and the possibility that combat stress or environmental factors might have led to inaccurate assessments. However, his meaning was clear to everyone in the room. He was essentially calling Maria a liar. Morrison continued by suggesting that inflated kill counts could have serious implications for tactical planning and resource allocation. If commanders were making decisions based on inaccurate information about sniper effectiveness, it could potentially put other Marines at risk during future operations. As Morrison spoke, Maria felt her face flush with a mixture of anger and humiliation. She had dedicated herself completely to her military service and had consistently performed at the highest levels under the most challenging conditions. To have her integrity questioned in front of a general officer was both personally devastating and professionally damaging. However, Maria's training and discipline prevented her from responding emotionally to Morrison's accusations. She maintained her military bearing and waited for permission to respond, knowing that her next words could determine the trajectory of her entire career. General Hayes listened to Morrison's concerns without interruption, occasionally making notes, but revealing nothing of her thoughts through her facial expressions. When the gunnery sergeant finished speaking and returned to his seat, the room fell silent as everyone waited for the general's response. The general's first words were directed toward Lieutenant Colonel Parker, asking whether he had confidence in the verification procedures used for combat reporting at his base. Parker responded firmly that all procedures met or exceeded military standards and that he had complete confidence in the accuracy of reported activities. General Hayes then turned her attention to Maria, asking if she wished to respond to the concerns that had been raised. Maria stood and requested permission to provide additional documentation that might address any questions about her reported activities. What happened next surprised everyone in the room. General Hayes informed the group that she had not come to FOB Reaper for a routine inspection, but rather to personally investigate reports of unit cohesion problems that could affect operational effectiveness. She had been monitoring the situation through informal channels and was aware of the ongoing controversy surrounding Maria's reported combat activities. The general revealed that she had brought with her detailed files containing independent verification of Maria's activities from multiple sources, including satellite imagery, intercepted enemy communications, and reports from other units operating in the region. These sources had been carefully analyzed by intelligence specialists who had no connection to FOB Reaper or knowledge of the internal controversy. General Hayes ordered her aide to distribute copies of satellite imagery that clearly showed the compound where Maria had made her long-range kills. The images were time-stamped and showed the positions of enemy fighters before and after the engagement. The precision of the shots was evident from the imagery, and the tactical impact was clearly documented. The general then revealed intercepted Taliban communications that specifically mentioned the loss of senior commanders and the disruption of their operations following Maria's successful engagements. Enemy forces had been forced to change their tactics and procedures specifically because of the effectiveness of the sniper activities at FOB Reaper. Additional documentation included reports from other coalition units that had observed Maria's operations from different vantage points. These independent witnesses had confirmed the ranges, conditions, and outcomes of her engagements without any knowledge of the controversy surrounding her activities. As the evidence was presented, the atmosphere in the briefing room began to shift dramatically. Marines who had previously harbored doubts about Maria's capabilities were confronted with overwhelming proof of her exceptional performance. The documentation was thorough, objective, and completely beyond dispute. General Hayes then addressed the broader issue of women in combat roles, explaining that the military was undergoing historic changes that required all Marines to adapt their thinking and attitudes. She emphasized that the integration of women into previously male-only roles was not a social experiment, but rather a military necessity driven by operational requirements and the need to utilize all available human resources. The general spoke about her own experiences as a pioneering woman in the Marine Corps, describing the challenges she had faced and the importance of proving herself through performance rather than rhetoric. She emphasized that the military's strength came from its ability to evaluate individuals based on their capabilities rather than their gender or other irrelevant characteristics. Morrison listened to the general's presentation with growing discomfort as it became clear that his accusations had been not only wrong, but potentially damaging to unit effectiveness and military readiness. The evidence presented was overwhelming and irrefutable, leaving no room for continued doubt about Maria's capabilities or integrity. General Hayes then made a statement that would be remembered by everyone present for years to come. She declared that Sergeant Rodriguez represented the future of the Marine Corps and that her performance demonstrated the potential contributions that women could make in combat roles when given proper training and support. The general announced that she was recommending Maria for immediate promotion and for assignment to the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School as an instructor. This assignment would not only recognize her exceptional performance, but would also provide her with the opportunity to train the next generation of military snipers. Furthermore, General Hayes stated that she was ordering a comprehensive review of unit leadership and attitudes toward female Marines in combat roles. She made it clear that personal prejudices that interfered with military effectiveness would not be tolerated and that leaders who could not adapt to changing military requirements would be replaced. The impact on Morrison was immediate and devastating. His reputation as a senior enlisted leader had been built on his experience and judgment, but his public questioning of a fellow Marine's integrity based on gender bias rather than factual evidence had severely damaged his credibility. General Hayes addressed Morrison directly, acknowledging his years of service, while making it clear that his attitude toward female Marines was incompatible with current military requirements. She informed him that he would be transferred to a non-combat assignment, where his experience could be utilized without affecting the integration of women into combat roles. The meeting concluded with General Hayes congratulating Maria on her exceptional performance and encouraging her to continue setting the standard for excellence that others could follow. She emphasized that pioneers in any field faced additional scrutiny and challenges, but that their success opened doors for others who would follow. As personnel began filing out of the briefing room, the transformation in atmosphere was remarkable. Marines who had previously been uncertain about Maria's capabilities now looked at her with obvious respect and admiration. The documentation presented by General Hayes had removed any possible doubt about her achievements and had established her as one of the most effective snipers in the Marine Corps. Corporal Thompson approached Maria with a broad smile, expressing his satisfaction that her capabilities had been officially recognized and validated. Other Marines who had supported her throughout the controversy also offered their congratulations and expressed relief that the issue had been resolved so definitively. However, the most significant change was in Maria herself. The weight of constantly having to prove herself had been lifted, replaced by official recognition of her achievements and clear support from the highest levels of military leadership. She could now focus completely on her mission without the distraction of defending her reputation against unfounded accusations. Morrison left the briefing room in silence, accompanied by sympathetic looks from some Marines who respected his years of service, even while acknowledging that his attitude had been wrong. His transfer orders would come through within days, ending his assignment at FOB Reaper and effectively ending his influence over the careers of female Marines. Lieutenant Colonel Parker remained behind to speak privately with General Hayes about the implications of the investigation and the lessons learned about managing integrated units in combat environments. The colonel acknowledged that he should have addressed the unit cohesion problems more decisively before they escalated to the point of requiring intervention from general officer level. General Hayes used the opportunity to emphasize the importance of proactive leadership in managing the cultural changes that were occurring throughout the military. She stressed that commanders at all levels needed to set clear expectations about professional behavior and needed to address prejudice and discrimination before they could undermine unit effectiveness. The general's visit to FOB Reaper had accomplished far more than simply resolving a personnel dispute. It had sent a clear message throughout the military about the importance of supporting qualified women in combat roles and about the consequences of allowing personal prejudices to interfere with military effectiveness. Word of the confrontation and its resolution spread quickly through military communication networks, carrying implications that extended far beyond the remote base in Afghanistan. The incident became a defining moment in the ongoing integration of women into combat roles and established precedents that would influence military policy for years to come. For Maria, the vindication was complete and overwhelming. Not only had her integrity been defended by a general officer, but her future career prospect had been significantly enhanced. The recommendation for promotion and instructor assignment represented opportunities that most Marines could only dream about achieving. The afternoon following the briefing found Maria back at her position on the firing range, but this time her practice session had a completely different atmosphere. Instead of the solitary training that had characterized her previous months at FOB Reaper, she was now surrounded by Marines who wanted to learn from her expertise and experience. Young Marines asked technical questions about shooting techniques, while more experienced personnel sought her insights on tactical applications of sniper capabilities. The transformation from isolation to integration had occurred virtually overnight, demonstrating the power of official recognition and leadership support. As the sun set over the Afghan mountains that evening, Maria reflected on the events that had changed her life so dramatically. The confrontation with Morrison had been painful and humiliating, but it had ultimately led to complete vindication and recognition of her achievements. The support of General Hayes had provided more than just resolution of a personnel dispute. It had established Maria as a symbol of the changing military and had given her a platform to influence the future integration of women into combat roles. Her success would inspire other women to pursue similar careers and would help establish the precedents necessary for full equality in military service. The incident at FOB Reaper will be studied in military leadership courses as an example of how personal prejudices could threaten unit effectiveness and how proper leadership intervention could resolve such problems. It would also be cited as evidence of the successful integration of women into combat roles when they were given proper training and support. The weeks following General Hayes's dramatic intervention at Forward Operating Base Reaper witnessed profound changes that extended far beyond the immediate participants in the confrontation. The vindication of Maria Rodriguez had created ripple effects throughout the military community, influencing policies, attitudes, and career trajectories in ways that would be felt for years to come. Maria's daily routine had transformed completely from the isolated existence she had endured during the months of controversy. Where she had once eaten meals alone or with only Corporal Thompson for company, she now found herself surrounded by Marines eager to learn from her experience and expertise. The mess hall conversations that had once featured whispered doubts about her capabilities were replaced by detailed discussions of sniper techniques and tactical applications. The change in atmosphere was most evident during training exercises and range time. Maria had become an unofficial instructor for junior Marines interested in marksmanship improvement, sharing insights that came from both her exceptional training and her extensive combat experience. Her ability to explain complex technical concepts in simple terms made her an effective teacher, and her patience with struggling students earned respect throughout the unit. Lieutenant Colonel Parker had implemented significant changes in unit procedures following his private discussion with General Hayes. New protocols were established for addressing discrimination and harassment complaints, ensuring that such issues would be handled promptly and decisively before they could escalate to the point of affecting unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. The colonel also instituted regular training sessions on military ethics and professional conduct, emphasizing the importance of evaluating personnel based on performance rather than irrelevant personal characteristics. These sessions addressed not only gender discrimination, but also issues related to race, religion, and other factors that could potentially divide military units. Most significantly, Parker established mentorship programs designed to support Marines who were pioneers in previously restricted career fields. These programs paired experienced leaders with junior personnel who faced unique challenges in breaking through traditional barriers, providing both professional guidance and personal support during difficult transitions. Meanwhile, the investigation ordered by General Hayes was proceeding with typical military thoroughness. Teams of investigators were reviewing unit records, conducting interviews with personnel, and analyzing the factors that had contributed to the breakdown in unit cohesion. The investigation would ultimately result in policy recommendations that would influence military practices throughout all services. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison's transfer orders arrived exactly 1 week after the confrontation in the briefing room. His new assignment was to a training base in the continental United States, where his experience could be utilized in preparing Marines for deployment without affecting the integration of women into combat roles. Morrison's departure was handled with typical military professionalism, though the underlying tensions were evident to careful observers. Some Marines who had shared his prejudices remained sympathetic to his situation, while others viewed his transfer as appropriate consequences for behavior that had threatened unit effectiveness. The gunnery sergeant's final days at FOB Reaper were marked by a subdued atmosphere as he completed his transfer preparations. He had built strong relationships with many Marines during his months at the base, and his departure represented the end of an era for those who had served under his leadership. However, Morrison's legacy extended beyond his personal situation. His public confrontation with Maria had forced the military to confront issues that might otherwise have remained hidden beneath the surface of official integration policies. The incident had provided an opportunity for leadership to clearly establish expectations and consequences regarding discrimination and prejudice. The broader implications of the incident were being felt throughout the military community as word spread through informal communication networks. Female Marines serving in other units reported increased support from their commanders and colleagues as leaders at all levels sought to avoid the kind of problems that had occurred at FOB Reaper. Military training programs began incorporating lessons learned from the incident, using it as a case study for leadership courses and professional development seminars. The confrontation between Morrison and Maria became a textbook example of how personal prejudices could threaten military effectiveness and how proper leadership intervention could resolve such conflicts. General Hayes had returned to her headquarters, but continued to monitor the situation at FOB Reaper through regular reports and informal contacts. Her intervention had been successful in resolving the immediate crisis, but she was also using the incident to advance broader policy objectives related to military integration and equality. The general had begun speaking about the incident at military conferences and professional development forums, using Maria's story as evidence of the capabilities that women could bring to combat roles when given proper training and support. Her advocacy was helping to shape military policies at the highest levels and was influencing decisions about future integration efforts. Maria's promotion orders arrived 3 weeks after General Hayes' visit, officially recognizing her advancement to the rank of Staff Sergeant. The promotion was accompanied by orders to report to the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School as an instructor, fulfilling the general's promise to provide her with opportunities to influence the next generation of military snipers. The assignment to instructor duty represented a significant honor for any Marine sniper, but it was particularly meaningful for Maria as one of the first women to achieve such recognition in the field. Her role would involve not only teaching technical skills, but also serving as a role model for other women considering careers in previously restricted specialties. Preparation for her new assignment required extensive coordination with military education specialists and curriculum developers. The Marine Corps was committed to ensuring that Maria's transition to instructor duty would be successful and that her unique perspective as a combat-proven female sniper would be effectively utilized in training programs. However, The most significant impact of the incident was perhaps the change in Maria herself. The months of controversy and doubt had tested her resilience and determination, but the ultimate vindication had provided her with confidence that would serve her throughout her remaining military career. Maria had learned valuable lessons about perseverance, professional integrity, and the importance of maintaining high standards even when facing adversity. These lessons would influence her approach to leadership and instruction as she moved into positions of increasing responsibility and influence. The combat operations at FOB Reaper continued without interruption, but the atmosphere and dynamics had changed significantly. The resolution of the controversy surrounding Maria's capabilities had improved unit morale and cohesion, leading to enhanced operational effectiveness and mission accomplishment. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces in the region continued to struggle with the disruption of their command structure that had resulted from Maria's successful elimination of senior Taliban leaders. The tactical impact of her sniper activities had extended far beyond the immediate effects of individual kills, creating lasting advantages for coalition forces. Corporal Thompson received orders for his next assignment shortly after Maria's promotion, but his time serving as her spotter had provided him with exceptional experience that would benefit him throughout his career. The partnership between Thompson and Maria had become a model for effective sniper teams, demonstrating the importance of trust, communication, and mutual support in achieving mission success. Thompson's after-action reports and recommendations would influence training programs for future spotter personnel, incorporating lessons learned from their successful operations in Afghanistan. His perspective as a male Marine who had worked closely with a female sniper would be valuable in addressing remaining concerns about gender integration in combat specialties. The medical officer at FOB Reaper, Captain Sarah Chun, had observed the controversy and its resolution from a unique perspective as another female officer serving in a combat environment. The successful vindication of Maria's capabilities had positive implications for all women serving in challenging military assignments. Captain Chun reported improved morale among female personnel throughout the base, as Maria's success had demonstrated that excellence could be recognized and rewarded regardless of gender. The incident had also shown that military leadership was committed to supporting qualified women in their career advancement and professional development. The intelligence section at FOB Reaper had conducted detailed analysis of the impact of Maria's sniper activities on enemy operations in the region. Their reports documented significant disruption of Taliban command and control capabilities, leading to reduced effectiveness of enemy operations and improved security for coalition forces. This analysis provided objective evidence of the strategic value of precision sniper operations and validated the decision to assign Maria to her combat role. The documentation would be used in future planning and resource allocation decisions, demonstrating the importance of maintaining highly trained sniper capabilities in combat units. Regional military commanders had taken notice of the incident and its implications for their own units. Several commanders initiated reviews of their personnel policies and training programs to ensure that they were properly supporting the integration of women into combat roles. These reviews led to policy clarifications and training improvements that benefited female service members throughout the region. The incident at FOB Reaper had served as a catalyst for broader improvements in military practices and attitudes regarding gender integration. The Public Affairs Office at Regional Command faced challenges in managing media interest in the story without compromising operational security or violating privacy requirements. The incident had generated significant interest among journalists covering military affairs, but detailed information about specific operations and personnel could not be released publicly. However, military public affairs specialists were able to use general aspects of the story to highlight the successful integration of women into combat roles and the outstanding performance of female Marines in challenging assignments. This positive coverage helped to build public support for continued expansion of opportunities for women in military service. Professional military journals and publications began featuring articles about the incident and its implications for military leadership and personnel management. These articles provided analysis and commentary that helped military leaders understand the broader significance of the events at FOB Reaper. The academic analysis of the incident contributed to ongoing debates about military culture, leadership effectiveness, and the management of organizational change in traditional institutions. Military sociologists and leadership experts found valuable lessons in the way the crisis had developed and been resolved. Training commands throughout the military began incorporating elements of Maria's story into their curricula, using her experience as an example of professional excellence and perseverance in the face of adversity. Her story became an inspiration for young Marines beginning their careers and a reminder for experienced leaders about the importance of supporting all qualified personnel. The integration of Maria's story into training programs helped to establish new cultural norms and expectations regarding gender equality and professional respect. Future generations of military leaders would grow up with different assumptions and attitudes about the capabilities and contributions of women in combat roles. Military chaplains at various installations reported increased requests for counseling and guidance from female service members who had been inspired by Maria's example. Her success had encouraged other women to pursue challenging military specialties and to persevere through difficulties that might otherwise have deterred them from their career goals. The psychological impact of Maria's vindication extended throughout the military community, providing hope and encouragement for women facing similar challenges in their own military careers. Her story demonstrated that excellence would ultimately be recognized and rewarded, regardless of gender or initial skepticism from colleagues. Research organizations studying military integration began using the incident at FOB Reaper as a case study for understanding the dynamics of organizational change and the factors that contribute to successful integration of previously excluded groups. The research would inform future policy decisions and training programs. The scholarly analysis of the incident provided insights into leadership behavior, group dynamics, and the management of prejudice and discrimination in military organizations. These insights would be valuable for military leaders facing similar challenges in their own units and commands. As the immediate aftermath of the confrontation began to settle into a new normal, the long-term implications of the incident continued to unfold. Maria's vindication had established important precedents and had demonstrated the military's commitment to supporting qualified personnel regardless of gender 6 months after the confrontation that changed her life. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stood before her first class of Marine Corps Scout Sniper School students at Quantico, Virginia. The faces looking back at her represented a new generation of Marines who would grow up in a military where women in combat roles were no longer an experiment, but an established reality. Among the 24 students in her advanced marksmanship course were 3 women, a number that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. The transformation of Maria's career had been remarkable, but it reflected broader changes occurring throughout the Marine Corps and the military as a whole. The incident at FOB Reaper had become a catalyst for policy reforms and cultural shifts that extended far beyond the participants in the original confrontation. Military leadership had recognized that the successful integration of women into combat roles required not just policy changes, but fundamental shifts in attitudes and expectations. Maria's first weeks as an instructor had presented unique challenges as she worked to establish credibility with students who were initially uncertain about learning from female instructor. However, her combat experience and technical expertise quickly overcame any initial skepticism. Students discovered that her teaching methods were exceptionally effective, combining theoretical knowledge with practical insights gained from actual combat operations. The curriculum that Maria developed incorporated lessons learned from her deployment to Afghanistan, including case studies based on her actual combat engagements. Students studied the tactical situations she had faced, analyzed her decision-making processes, and learned from the technical challenges she had overcome. These real-world examples provided invaluable learning opportunities that could not be replicated through simulation or theoretical instruction alone. One of Maria's most popular classes focused on extreme-range shooting techniques, drawing from her experience making successful kills at distances exceeding 1,200 meters. Students learned about the complex calculations required for such shots, including adjustments for altitude, wind speed, temperature, and atmosphere pressure. More importantly, they learned about the mental discipline and patience required for precision shooting under combat conditions. The psychological aspects of sniper operations received particular emphasis in Maria's instruction based on her understanding of the mental challenges faced by combat snipers. She taught students about managing stress, maintaining focus during extended observation periods, and making life and death decisions under extreme pressure. Her personal experience provided authenticity that made these lessons particularly impactful. Female students in Maria's classes found her to be an invaluable mentor and role model, but she was careful to treat all students equally regardless of gender. She understood that her position as one of the first female sniper instructors carried special responsibilities, but she was determined to succeed based on her teaching effectiveness rather than symbolic value alone. The three women in Maria's current class represented different backgrounds and motivations, but all had been inspired in some way by her example. Lance Corporal Jennifer Walsh had grown up in a military family and had always planned to pursue a combat specialty. Private First Class Amanda Chun had initially enlisted for the educational benefits, but had discovered an exceptional aptitude for marksmanship. Corporal Lisa Martinez had transferred from logistics after hearing about Maria's achievements and deciding to pursue a more challenging military specialty. Maria's approach to mentoring female students was subtle but effective. She provided additional guidance and support when needed, but always in ways that did not create resentment among male students or suggest that women required special treatment. Her goal was to help all students succeed while ensuring that female students had the tools and confidence needed to overcome additional challenges they might face. The success of Maria's instruction was reflected in the performance of her students during qualification exercises and field training operations. Her classes consistently achieved higher scores than previous groups, and students reported greater confidence in their abilities and understanding of sniper operations. The Marine Corps recognized these results and began incorporating her teaching methods into the standard curriculum. Meanwhile, the broader implications of the incident at FOB Reaper continued to unfold throughout the military community. General Hayes had used the case study in multiple presentations to senior military leaders, demonstrating how leadership intervention could resolve discrimination issues while preserving unit effectiveness and individual careers. The general's advocacy had contributed to policy changes that provided better support for women in combat roles and established clearer procedures for addressing discrimination complaints. New regulations required mandatory training for senior enlisted personnel on military equal opportunity policies and created mechanisms for anonymous reporting of discrimination incidents. Military research organizations had conducted extensive analysis of the FOB Reaper incident, producing studies that were used to improve training programs and leadership development courses. The research identified factors that contributed to successful integration and highlighted warning signs that commanders should watch for in their own units. One significant finding was the importance of proactive leadership in preventing discrimination issues from escalating to the point where they affected unit cohesion. Commanders who addressed problems early and decisively were able to maintain effective integrated units, while those who ignored or minimized issues often faced more serious problems later. The research also emphasized the value of having clear policies and procedures that all personnel understood and respected. Units with well-defined expectations and consequences for discriminatory behavior experience fewer problems than those where policies were vague or inconsistently enforced. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison's career had effectively ended with his transfer from FOB Reaper, though he had completed his 22 years of service and retired with full benefits. His experience served as a cautionary tale for other senior enlisted personnel who might harbor similar prejudices about women in combat roles. Morrison's retirement ceremony was attended by Marines who had served under his leadership and respected his contributions to the Corps despite disagreeing with his attitudes about gender integration. The ceremony provided closure for a career that had included distinguished service but had ended on a controversial note. The contrast between Morrison's forced retirement and Maria's rapid career advancement illustrated the changing priorities and values of the modern military. Leaders who could adapt to new requirements and support all qualified personnel were rewarded with increased responsibilities and opportunities, while those who clung to outdated attitudes found their careers limited. Corporal Thompson had been promoted to sergeant and was serving as a sniper team leader in a unit deployed to Syria. His experience working with Maria had made him an effective advocate for gender integration and had enhanced his reputation as a leader who could work effectively with diverse personnel. Thompson's success in his new assignment was partly attributed to the leadership skills he had developed while supporting Maria during the challenging period at FOB Reaper. His ability to maintain loyalty and professionalism under difficult circumstances had impressed his superiors and had prepared him for increased responsibilities. Lieutenant Colonel Parker had received recognition for his handling of the integration challenges at FOB Reaper and had been selected for promotion to colonel. His experience managing the crisis had provided him with valuable insights into leadership and personnel management that would serve him well in future assignments. Parker's promotion orders included assignment to a Pentagon position where he would help develop policies for military integration and diversity initiatives. His practical experience with gender integration issues made him a valuable contributor to policy development and implementation planning. The base at FOB Reaper had continued its mission without interruption, but the atmosphere and culture had changed significantly. The successful resolution of the discrimination issues had improved morale and unit cohesion, leading to enhanced operational effectiveness and mission accomplishment. Current personnel at the base included several women serving in combat roles, and their integration had proceeded smoothly thanks to the precedents established and lessons learned from Maria's experience. The base had become a model for successful gender integration in combat environments. Intelligence analysis continued to document the long-term impact of Maria's sniper operations on enemy activities in the region. Taliban forces had been forced to modify their tactics and procedures significantly, and their operational effectiveness had been permanently reduced by the loss of experienced leadership. The strategic impact of precision sniper operations had been validated by Maria's achievements, leading to increased emphasis on sniper training and deployment in military planning. Her success had demonstrated the value of investing in advanced training and equipment for sniper operations. Military journalists and historians had begun documenting the incident at FOB Reaper as a significant milestone in the integration of women into combat roles. The story was being preserved as part of the institutional memory of the Marine Corps and would be studied by future military leaders. Academic researchers had also taken interest in the case, using it to study organizational change and the management of diversity in traditional institutions. The incident provided valuable insights into leadership behavior and the factors that contribute to successful integration efforts. Public interest in Maria's story had grown significantly, though operational security requirements limited the details that could be shared publicly. Her achievements have been recognized in military publications and had inspired other women to pursue challenging military specialties. Media coverage of her success had helped to build public support for expanding opportunities for women in military service and had demonstrated the capabilities that women could bring to previously restricted roles. The positive coverage had been valuable for military recruitment efforts and public relations initiatives. Educational institutions had begun incorporating Maria's story into military science curricula and leadership courses. Her experience provided valuable lessons about perseverance, professional integrity, and the importance of supporting qualified personnel regardless of personal characteristics. The case study of her vindication was being used to teach future military leaders about the importance of objective evaluation and the dangers of allowing personal prejudices to influence professional decisions. These lessons would help prevent similar problems in future integrated units. Veterans organizations had embraced Maria's story as an example of the outstanding service provided by women in combat roles. Her achievements had helped to change attitudes among older veterans who might have been skeptical about gender integration in the military. The support of veterans groups had been valuable for building broader social acceptance of women in combat roles and had helped to create a more welcoming environment for female veterans returning to civilian life. Maria's success had become a source of pride for the entire military community. Military families had also been influenced by Maria's example, with many parents encouraging their daughters to consider military service and combat specialties that would previously have been viewed as inappropriate or impossible. Her story had helped to expand perceptions of what women could achieve in military careers. The cultural impact of Maria's success extended beyond the military community to influence broader societal attitudes about gender roles and capabilities. Her achievements had contributed to ongoing discussions about equality and opportunity in various fields and professions. As Maria stood before her students each day, she understood that her role extended far beyond teaching marksmanship techniques. She was helping to shape the future of the Marine Corps and the military, training the next generation of leaders who would continue the process of integration and transformation. Her students would carry forward the lessons they learned, not just about shooting and tactics, but about professionalism, integrity, and the importance of evaluating individuals based on their capabilities rather than irrelevant personal characteristics. These lessons would influence military culture for decades to come. The incident that had nearly destroyed Maria's career had instead become the foundation for a new chapter in military history. Her vindication had established important precedents and had demonstrated that excellence would ultimately be recognized and rewarded, regardless of the obstacles that might be encountered along the way. Looking toward the future, Maria could see continued progress in the integration of women into all military specialties and leadership positions. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable were being dismantled through the efforts of pioneers who were willing to face challenges and prove their capabilities through exceptional performance. Her own story would become part of the legacy that would inspire future generations of women to pursue their goals without limitation and would remind military leaders of their responsibility to support all qualified personnel in achieving their full potential. The confrontation that had tested her resolve had ultimately strengthened not just her own career, but the entire military institution. The transformation was far from complete, but the foundation had been established for a military that would truly utilize all of its human resources effectively. Maria's experience had shown that integration could be successful when supported by proper leadership and when individuals were willing to prove themselves through dedication, professionalism, and exceptional performance. As she concluded each day of instruction, Maria felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that her students would carry forward the standards of excellence and professionalism that would define the future Marine Corps. Her legacy would live on through their achievements and through the continued advancement of women in military service. The general who had called her a liar had been proven wrong in the most decisive way possible. But more importantly, the military had been proven right in its decision to expand opportunities for qualified women. The future would bring new challenges and opportunities, but the precedents established through Maria's experience would provide guidance for meeting those challenges successfully.